You're listening to Healthcare Now Radio. Stand by for This Just In, the latest in healthcare innovation and technology trends with your HIT advisor, Justin Barnes.
Thank you for tuning in, and welcome to This Just In. I'm your host, Justin Barnes. In these half-hour segments, I'll bring you the latest advancements in healthcare, policy, strategy, and innovation. As always, we're broadcasting from the This Just In studios on the Business Radio X network, as well as the Healthcare Now radio network. For this episode, my 104th episode, we're going to speak to a good friend, Hans Utz, co-founder and partner with the Combine. I love that name, Hans. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be on.
Yeah. So before we dive in, obviously we had a lot of great content to cover. Tell us a little bit about your background. Where'd you grow up, attend college, all that good stuff?
Sure. Well, I grew up on the coast of Georgia, and you'd be surprised how many folks don't realize there is a coast of Georgia. But it's part of the Low Country, and when I finished up with high school, came north and went to Georgia Tech to be an engineer. And so that's the path that's led me to the technical work I do.
Yeah. No, very cool. So where did you get the passion? I mean, obviously, if you went to tech, you have a strong passion for technology naturally, but where did that passion kind of come from? Did you grow up around it? All that.
Yeah. So it's a great question. If you don't mind me, taking a little bit personal, fairly specifically to healthcare. In fact, a general interest in technology, right? Everything in the world runs on tech. It feels like nowadays.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, my wife and I lost a son. And it was after a very difficult illness. Hypoplastic left heart syndrome was the diagnosis. And if there's any cardiologists listening, they'll recognize the severity of that diagnosis. But we sat, for weeks in the ICU at the front lines of the absolute best in the world care that can be delivered. Right. I mean, so when we talk about technology, this is off the charts. This is NASA level technology. It's the best that we have as a species in terms of what we can deliver. And I remember watching the caregivers that were there, the nurses and the doctors, and the unbelievable amount of complexity of what they were dealing with every single day, and how we say technology is enabling, but if we're not careful, technology can also be overwhelming.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that on so many fronts, there's so much that we can do to help these people. These heroes really continue to deliver the care. And even though we had a terrible outcome, it was very, very painful. I could not have felt more cared for or in a better environment than that. And it came down to the people. It wasn't the technology that did that. It really came down to the people. And so we have a lot of motivation. My wife and I, we give a lot towards these causes, and just have personally a tremendous amount of motivation to try to enable and empower and provide the tools and support for these caregivers to continue to do the great work they do.
Yeah, first of all, moving story. I did not know about your loss. We've been friends for a couple of years, but I did not know that. So obviously, sorry there, but what a phenomenal story. And I couldn't agree more, Hans. My passion in healthcare, I've been pretty much on the innovation side, some service, because when you have a technology company, you have to have service wrapped around it, and to an extent. But as healthcare has evolved, and as you just articulated very well, it's about the people, it's about the caregivers, and my passions now really lie around having that, I call it innovation-enabled service. It's a service, it's about the care providers, it's about the people, it's about the technologists in our industry, about the innovators, but it's about the human. We're using technology and innovation, but it's not about innovation itself. It's about how do we use it, how do we implement it, how do we build best practices around it, and how do we use innovation and all of our expertise to benefit healthcare across the entire spectrum. So,
couldn't agree more. That's well said.
I love it. So during our lunch, you brought up a great concept, and I've seen it out there a little bit, but you articulated it very well. So I think I got you on air literally as fast as I could. You talked about one of the strategies in the Combine. And the Combine, what you guys do, and I know we'll talk about that in a little bit, you guys do a lot to benefit companies across the entire spectrum, not just in healthcare, but in a lot of sectors, I believe. But you brought up one specific one around large enterprises and not innovating. So why aren't large enterprises more innovative, I guess is the best way to kind of put that.
It's a great question. And I want to maybe take a little exception with the way that I think folks generally frame that. Large enterprises are innovative, right? The highest contributors to patent filings are large enterprises, right? And they're, these companies are on the front lines solving problems that they're seeing in their various industries, and healthcare is no different. And in fact, I'd say actually healthcare is pretty exemplary for this. So the challenge isn't whether they're innovating. I think the biggest issues are they commercializing that innovation? Are they able to get the great ideas and great solutions that their folks are generating off the shelf, out of the four walls and into the market in a way that in most industries drives the bottom line, in healthcare really fundamentally improves patient outcomes, right? That's the challenge. It's not one of innovation, it's one of commercialization. There's a great quote that Thomas Edison has. It says, invention is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration, right? And it's that perspiration part that I think people tend to give short shrift to.
Yeah. No, excellent. So what are some of the specific challenges facing large enterprises and trying to bring their innovation to market?
Yeah, so there's a couple that I think we see routinely, right? And they don't get looked at, I think, particularly closely. But the first one we can talk about is around corporate governance, right? If you look at what the job of a CFO or what the general counsel's role is in a large company, their job is to make sure that the company continues to exist tomorrow and well into the future. And so when you go to them and say, hey, we want to take on this extremely capital intensive, high risk opportunity in a business that's different from what we typically do every day, let's throw a bunch of money at it. They're required really by their roles to tap the brakes on that and intercede. And then unless you solve that kind of issue and provide a mechanism for them to be able to authorize the sort of capital that's required, they're going to have difficulty getting on board with that. Another one, and this one we'll talk a little bit as it relates to healthcare, is around workforce capability. And do you, it's one thing to see the problem and come up with a good idea, but do you have business leaders within your company that are experienced with taking very, very early phase ideas and driving them into the market in a cash efficient manner? I mean, that's just a unique skill set, and many organizations don't have that, right? And then the last one is really around the organizational structure. How do you assemble a team with a very diverse background, an array of skills to very efficiently and quickly? If you think about what a startup really is, it's just an extremely autonomous team with very localized decision authority that is, by necessity, aggressively multifunctional. It's one thing to set up in a startup. It's very difficult to do that in a large enterprise. And so these things provide friction, I think, towards getting that innovation out of the four walls of the company.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've lived this, I guess, in so many ways. My early career, I worked I came and went to a large company right out of college, HBO-owned company, which then merged with McKesson. But we we were not an innovator. I mean, I loved my experience. I love the people I worked with. I love the company. But we weren't building big innovation. We were acquiring big innovation. But we weren't truly the best innovators of things that we actually created from within our four walls. So I lived and breathed exactly what you're hitting on. You've covered it a little bit. Any additional specific challenges that we face in healthcare regarding this, or is it different, or are we just kind of the same with everybody else? What do you think there?
Well, I would say you're similar to a higher order, right? So here's what we see a lot in healthcare. Honestly, Justin, it's hard to argue that there is a better profession trained in the art of diagnosing a problem and solving a problem than the medical professional, right? I mean, so other industries may accidentally stumble on solutions or have some process around stumbling on solutions. But in healthcare, you have, thousands, millions of people who are specifically trained on the scientific method, whose job it is on a daily basis to diagnose issues. And so thinking that they're just going to turn that part of their brain off when they step away from the patient and not look at, hospital processes, or not look at billing systems, or not look at all of the other things that you're dealing with in healthcare is ludicrous. Of course they're doing that. And we see that all the time. That gets to my earlier issue around workforce capability, though. Again, it's one thing to very elegantly and cleanly diagnose a problem and even potentially come up with a solution. It's a very different set of skills to learn or to know how to, what's the level of funding this thing needs to have to get to market? How do you structure a team around a very, very early phase concept to develop the technology? There's plenty of doctors that I've seen that have identified a very, very difficult, system problem, that then have gone out and taught themselves how to code in order to create the solution for that. And as much as I love medical professionals, the best doctor coder in the world is not going to compare to a coder that's been doing it their entire life. So it's really around, recognizing your lanes, recognizing where your skill sets are, and being able to assemble the team around the idea necessary to execute.
No, that's fantastic. Great advice. And for those just tuning in, we're speaking with Hans Utz, co-founder and partner with the Combine. So you mentioned R&D and investment there. Is the investment in R&D sufficient for innovation that we currently see?
That's a great question. So let's talk a little bit about R&D. Everybody talks about R&D as if it's one word.
Right.
But it's two completely different things. Research and development are two different activities. And a lot of people forget that, right? And so what you'll see a lot in the market is plenty of money spent on the R side of research and development, and kind of a lot of floundering and unsurety of what to do on the development side of that, right? And this is actually reasonably well known in a number of large enterprises. I use GE often as an example here. They have entire organizational structures set up around handling the transition from, science-based research into commercial-based development. And that is something that I think the healthcare industry is only just beginning to really recognize is something you have to grapple with.
Yeah. So I guess how should, I think about partners in early stage innovation. I mean, how would we build upon that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a number of different ways that I think, let's use healthcare specifically as the example in this case, right? You see a lot of medical institutions or medical systems partnering with, for example, academic institutions for precisely this kind of activity. And there are definite benefits for that, particularly in terms of being able to achieve scale and having a tremendous number of engaged and interested resources to work on particular problems. But we see again and again that drives, to my earlier point, that really drives the research. When it moves on to the development side, in many ways, academic institutions are just as hampered as some of the healthcare systems. And in fact, I would argue in some cases they're actually more hampered in terms of being able to bring some of those things to market, right? So you have the examples of, a lot of people don't really realize this, but particularly in the case of public institutions, you have enormous constraints around what you can do with IP and how you can allow that IP out into the market and who benefits from that particular IP. The other thing that and I don't mean to cast aspersions here, right? But this is just a practical reality that we have to grapple with. You're seeing a lot of business programs and universities and other things develop entrepreneur track curriculum, for example. And there's some helpfulness to that, but I would caution against overselling that as a point of value. At the end of the day, true entrepreneurialism is an apprenticeship business. You've got to get in the trenches and you've got to do it. Learning the theory of entrepreneurialism gets you only so far until you hit the street and you have to make payroll next month and none of your suppliers have sent the money in yet, right? That's just, that's not something that you're going to teach someone in school. You've got to experience that and work through it to really understand how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there for sure, because I almost say it's, you really don't know how you're going to react until you get punched in the face. And that's the exact same example with, my gosh, making payroll or, not doing enough customer discovery. And next thing you know, you may have taken a little bit of money, but you're not getting customers. You're not, you're not building out your organization, your use cases. I mean, there's so many components to being an entrepreneur, and then how to, I remember in our early days at Greenway, we did really well for the first couple of years. And then I think it was like 05, 06, 05, maybe. We had a tough year. It looked like we actually could have been flat or almost down in our sales. And we just kind of laced up our boots and we legged it out. We just called it, we basically put on our boots, we laced them up, and we went to work. And we ended up crushing it for the year. Not as well as we did other years, but I think, usually we grew almost like 25% a year, 35% a year for 11 years. But that year we may only grown like 15 or 14, but still, we almost still gonna have a down year, but we kind of got in there, and thankfully a couple of us had been entrepreneurs before that. We knew how to buckle down, and we've been punched in the face before, but we knew how to get back up again and go back at it. And none of that can be taught in a school at all.
That's absolutely correct. I 100% there with you. And that's, I think, what we try to stress a lot is that it's great that you have people that understand what a cap table is, because you've been taught that in school. It's great that you have people that understand what typical venture equity terms are. These things are good and they're very important to know. But, how do you clamp down on costs within a 1 week span of time to make sure that you make payroll? How you got suppliers that aren't paying you. You get on the phone and you call and you call and you call and you call. And some of these things, to what you're saying, it's an experience thing. You just got to do it.
So one of the topics, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but we brought up is how the combine kind of gets in there. And before we go too far, tell us about healthcare institutions and how they're starting to specifically set up these focuses around innovation, because we talked about that, these chief innovation officer type roles, but still I think there's some big gaps. So give me your questions, give me your thoughts and answers on that.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? When you're going to make investments in innovation, it's very advantageous to have enormous amounts of scale and capital at your disposal, right? So it's one thing for the Stanford Medical Center, which is building I don't know, however many $1 billion building right now, extraordinarily well-funded, tightly tied to Stanford Business School with all sorts of entrepreneurial experience and huge benefactors, a lot of wealth from the valley of entrepreneurs themselves, a lot of entrepreneurials themselves that, support that particular system in developing innovation. And that is very difficult to replicate in any other market, right? So when you see folks having success in this space, when you see folks doing things that are working, you always have to kind of take a little bit of a look at what advantages they had to begin with, because some of that is not replicable. Some of that is not something you could just say, well, we're going to pick those things up and we're going to move it to this other system and make it work there. Right. So what we try to do with the Combine is take a look at that next tier of system or service provider that, aren't conveniently located next door to the largest conglomeration of venture wealth in the universe, right? And how can we help those organizations identify the innovation that they have within their four walls, help them think through a structured approach that de-risks to the extent possible, bringing that innovation out to market. And then how do you get that pushed out as broadly and widely as possible to improve patient outcomes and the care delivery experience? That's really the work of the Combine and how, what we do to try to help some of these organizations.
Yeah, I love the concept in what you guys are doing, because I've certainly, as we discussed over lunch, I've seen so many hospitals and health systems begin these programs. Some have done it very well. I work pretty closely with UPMC. We're actually doing a think tank up there in October, really in their innovation center, but it's exactly what they've been able to create. And they've done fairly well. But I think you can count on maybe one or two hands the institutions that have done it really well. But I'm not saying anything negative. I mean, I'm excited for them. I support this strategy by these health systems, and I think it's essential. It's essential to bringing their best practices, their hospitals and health systems being able to deploy technology and innovation with some of the brightest care providers in the world, test things. But as you said, we've got to make sure, and this is where a lot of them kind of come up short, at least in the beginning, is it's not replicatable. It's really for their instant only, or they created something inside, they bring it to, they say, all right, we're going to create an innovation center around it, and we're going to try to bring it to other health systems, and it's just not exportable. It's just, it's specific to a workflow or a subspecialty or something like that, and it's just not replicatable outside the four walls of their institution. And so, when you and I were speaking, I think we both agreed completely, and we've both seen this happening out there. So I really do love what the Combine is doing. So, just to close out that one aspect of the conversation, what else would you have, how else could you say that you guys benefit, or what are some of the next steps that you guys are going to take to help our hospitals and health systems with this type of a strategy?
Sure. So, if you don't mind, let me just talk a little bit about how the Combine does some of this, right? And so we have I want to put air quotes around the word process, right? Because I think you mentioned earlier, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Exactly.
Right. So we recognize that every circumstance and situation and client and innovation, frankly, is all unique. But in general, what we do is we'll start an engagement with a client and really help them understand the value of what their innovation is. We help them answer that question. Does this translate out of the four walls, or is this really only a problem solved for a specific use case that we have that no one else really does? We do what is called an investment grade diligence on these concepts. And we do the customer discovery. We do all of those steps that are necessary to really drive into that technology and determine whether it's translatable, and if it is translatable, what sort of value does it have? And what's interesting about healthcare is that value doesn't necessarily mean ROI or monetary return. I mean, that's always great, but what particularly I love about healthcare is that anything that really improves patient outcomes falls into the category of value. And that's a huge, huge metric that people want to pay attention to. And so after that particular engagement, any system would be able to say, look, I've got these 5 things. Of the 5, 3 of them are something that's pretty unique to the things that we need to be working on. 2 of them can translate out into the broader market. And if I were to translate them into the broader market, this is the investment that's going to be required on them. These are the customers that we're going to be going after. This is the way that we go after them. And this is what the team needs to look like in order to execute that. So it solves a lot of those experiential questions that people stumble on a lot when spinning up technology. The second part of the engagement is we offer this as well. My partner and I and our team, we've cumulatively run something like 20, 25 different early phase startup enterprises. And so we take, or we can take executive roles with the new startup as it spins out. And we, for less than what would cost you to have a permanent CEO, right, we're capable of providing that same guidance, expertise, and insight that you would with an experienced startup CEO for the first, say 12 to 36 months of that startup, right? And over the course of its life, we will recruit the permanent team, recruit the permanent players, identify what the skill sets are necessary as you go to market. My business partner says this all the time, right? You have a theory about that company when you take it to market, but until you hit the market, your theory is just that. And you may find out that you need a slightly different skill set in these positions as you're taking it into market. Well, the benefit of using the combine in that case is that we're temporary. You're going to replace us. You get to try those markets with us and to learn about how the markets work to identify what the permanent long-term talent needs to be in those positions.
I love it. Hey, Hans, we're at time. I love what you guys are doing, you and KP. Please keep it up, and I'm going to have you back on the show so we can hear more of the progress. But thank you again, and I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join the show.
Thanks for having me, Justin. It's a pleasure.
You got it, my friend. And thank you to everyone for listening and joining us today. Please tune in weekdays at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, 11:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, you can track me on Twitter at HIT Advisor and use the hashtag #ThisJustIn so we can respond to your comments from the show. In addition, all my content will be posted at justinbarnes.com. Thanks, everyone. Have a terrific week.